So good evening, everyone, and welcome to this online session on clinical trials and the benefits of research and investigation. My name is Alfonso Aguaron, and together with my colleague Tammy Cruikshank, I'll be moderating today's webinar. So today, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our two speakers, Dr. Denis Lacombe, Chief Executive Officer, and Iryna Shakhnenko from the International Affairs and Policies Department, Patient Relationship Manager from EORTC, which is the European Organization for Research and Treatment of Cancer. So Dr. Lacombe and Iryna, I would really like to thank you very much on behalf of Lung Cancer Europe for your valuable and precious time today to get us through this very interesting topic for people living with cancer, with lung cancer, the developed ones, and of course the patient community. So before we get started, I would like to give our attendees, for those you attending, a brief overview on the session dynamics. So the session will last about an hour. It will be finished by 3 p.m. Central European time. And during the first part of the session, Dr. Lacombe and Iryna will give us a comprehensive review on today's topic, which in total will last from around 40 minutes. And then we will have a second part in which we will have the possibility to ask your questions. To do so, you have two ways. If you'd like to make your questions live by using your microphone, you just have to press the raise hand button, and Tammy or me will allow you will unmute your microphone. When it is your channel, we'll give you the floor to ask your question live. If for some reason you would prefer to send your questions in writing, you can do that by writing them the Q&A during the chat window, and I'll make sure to read them and pass them through to our speakers. Also, I would like to remind you that you have the chance to enable the live transcription of the webinar in the bottom bar, so you can read automatically the generated subtitles of the webinar just in case you'd like to do so. So being said that, and without any further ado, I wish you all a very fruitful session. And Dr. Lacombe, I will give you the floor. So if you want to share your screen, you can start your presentation. So thank you.
Yep. Thank you for the introduction. I would like to check that everyone can see my presentation. Is it okay?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, wherever you are. Again, thank you for the invitation, I will try to give you, of course, the perception from the EORTC, which is a non-governmental and independent clinical research organization, on today's environment and a little bit how we perceive the evolution of the field of clinical research in the current, specifically more, of course, European environment. It will not necessarily be about lung cancer, but I hope to give you a broader picture on the evolution of the field. Before I get started with I would say the core messages, just for those of you who are less familiar with the EORTC, a few words about the organization. So as you probably know, we are a non-governmental and not-for-profit cancer clinical research organization. The mission is very simple, is survival and quality of life. And we do that, and we have a long-term sustainability, 60 years of existence, because we have generated clinical trial data sets which have hopefully change the life of cancer patients. I will give you some examples. And what is very important for this organization is multidisciplinarity, because it's about drugs, it's about radiation oncology, it's about surgery, it's about translational medicine, and trying to understand all the science that we can bring in our clinical trial to address key critical questions. Of course, we hope like this to set some new standards of care, but also sometimes new standards how in the field we work methodologically wise to make the field going further, and the organization in that respect, of course, has a good visibility, for instance, in the methodology of cancer clinical research, which is a little bit, of course, sometimes complex with statistics and so on, but it's very, very important, of course, to give to the patient, to the doctor, solid reference to, again, accept the outcome of a given clinical trial. I will be very short. We are not here to speak about the EORTC. If you want to have more information about the structure or how we function, you will find a lot of information on the EORTC website. I want just to give you some high-level metrics about the organization. We have a cruising, I would say, recruitment capacity of about 3,000 new patients every year on clinical trial. We have the capacity, for instance, last year to organize clinical trials in about 30 countries, and 600 investigators from 200 and almost 50 institutions contributed to our research program. As you can see on the last column, on the 31st of December last year, we had the 26 studies open to patient entry, and we have a capacity of opening and closing trial about 10 studies on a yearly basis. What is very important also for such an organization is to follow patients on long term, something that the commercial sector doesn't do, for again long-term outcome, long-term toxicity, long-term quality of life. So at any point in time, we work on about 140 studies. Of course, the very old one do not generate a lot of work, but for good prognosis patients, we try to understand their long-term outcome as well. So again, we are independent, we are multidisciplinary, we act across a number of tumors, we have an international reach, and of course, we follow the highest regulatory standard. We don't have to go through this slide. It's just to show you, and again, you can go back to EORTC website. We have made some substantial changes with immuno-oncology. You will find example, for instance, I don't know if you see my mouse, but comparing radiotherapy and surgery. So you see trials that are very important for patients which have nothing to do with drug development. You will see trials in very, very rare tumors, or for instance, combination with radiotherapy. So these are the type of trials purely dedicated to quality of life. So you will see a range of trials that, of course, are decided with our network of investigators because they believe these are the questions to be addressed for cancer patients. So not necessarily drug development oriented. So I think what I would like to tell you a little bit is about how the cancer field moves and how clinical research evolves, because the environment is relatively complex, and actually how do we position in this landscape as an organization to continue this agenda of cancer clinical trial. So basically, we try to bring our part in the complex ecosystem between what the governments, what the public sector is doing, what the for-profit sector is doing, and we are very grateful to the commercial sector to bring new drugs. But again, as you will see later on, it's not because we have new drugs that we have all the answer how to use this drug. And that's what we try to do, is how can we improve the treatments that are available for cancer patients, and again, how we can contribute to the evolution of the ecosystem. So I think it's important that I give you the picture a little bit where we position and the type of clinical research we are doing. What I should have told you on the previous slide, where I've shown you a number of clinical trials. You've seen trial in breast cancer, some in neuro-oncology. Of course, the EORTC has also done clinical trials, and we have a quite important agenda for lung cancer. For instance, in the recent years, we have done the denosumab trial, Splendor, in first-line non-small cell lung cancer in partnership with ETOP, which unfortunately was a negative study, but we have done also recently the PEARL study addressing pembrolizumab in the adjuvant setting of non-small cell lung cancer, which was a positive trial. So we are, of course, very active in the field of lung cancer, and I will give you also an example. I think, again, what we try to do, because we believe that the future for oncology, and I guess it's the case case for lung cancer is that we have many different type of therapeutic approach. We have surgery, we have radiotherapy, we still have chemotherapy, we have targeted agent. For certain cancer, we have hormonal agents, we have targeted agents, we have immunotherapy, gene therapy is evolving. And an organization like EORTC tries to do clinical research program to understand how to use all these modalities, because of course any manufacturer will focus on its product, on its technology to bring it to the market. But once it's on the market, we have to understand who benefits, when, how to combine eventually. And of course, we evolve in a relatively complex environment, because when I started my career in clinical research more than 30 years ago now, we were only dealing with clinical data. Today, we receive clinical data, but we receive also imaging data. We receive data from the laboratories, we have genomic data, all these type of things. So the data sets that we can generate are extremely complex. We see also, of course, that all these treatments are more and more expensive, especially in oncology. Drugs like immunotherapy are very expensive. They, of course, also have side effects. They are not necessarily, I would say, without any side effects. And we believe that it's extremely important to have an agenda in Europe that tries to understand who benefits when, and also to optimize the treatments. And that's where I will be coming at, to the concept of treatment optimization, because again, once a drug is available on the market, the work is not finished. The work starts, and sometimes it's not necessarily visible to patients. It's not necessarily visible to policymakers. It's not necessarily visible to the general public. So what is very visible, of course, and known by everyone are the blue boxes, which is drug development. And what the commercial sector does, and again, don't get me wrong, it's very important. But again, when a drug reaches the market, we have a number of questions. We don't necessarily know the optimal dosage or the sequence. If I take the example of pembrolizumab, which has been a game changer, certainly for lung cancer, pembrolizumab, the dosage changed 3 times after marketing authorization. There are trials currently ongoing to address, actually, in the adjuvant setting, in the post-operative setting, what is the optimal duration to give it. Why? Because it has toxicity, because it has cost, because not everybody necessarily benefits. And we refer also to important trials, which are de-escalation trial, because it's important to have new treatments, but it's also important not to overtreat and have undue toxicity. There are also patient populations that do not participate to the regulatory programs of companies. I'm thinking more specifically of elderly patients who usually do not have access of appropriate drug development, clinical research programs, but in real life, they receive the treatments. So I think there are a number of questions post-marketing that are very important and that are not necessarily addressed. And also something that is very important is the fact that it has an impact on the healthcare system, because when drugs are very expensive, if we overtreat patients unduly, it costs to society, but it costs to patients, because toxicity has to be treated. And that's what we refer as optimization. And there are a number of programs currently ongoing to optimize, for instance, immunotherapy for lung cancer. But I would like to give you also other examples outside the field of cancer, because you will realize that it's not necessarily, outside the field of lung cancer, because you will realize that the questions and that we have actually are important for all cancer patients. And here I want to share with you an example of prostate cancer, where these patients are treated with hormone treatments. And there have been 7 drugs that have been registered, all in continuous treatment. And we have good rationale to believe that an intermittent treatment that would be less toxic for patients, and the toxicity of hormones are very important, of course, would give potentially the same outcome. And it's a daily questions that the doctors have with their prostate cancer patients. So, but there is no data how to do so. So, you know, comparing a continuous treatment versus an intermittent treatment is very important. And that's the type of trial, of course, that no commercial entity is going to do. And this is the type of trial for which EORTC, of course, try to act at the policy level to enable in Europe to have these trials. And actually, we are very happy because this trial has been granted by the European Commission in the context of the cancer mission. So we are going to be able to do this trial. But you see how important it is, but also how challenging it is to have the funding to do this trial. Again, because they are not necessarily we cannot partner with industry for that, of course. But I would like to give you other examples, because this example for me, and I'm not involved in gynecology, and you will see that how important it is to have proper development for cancer patients, and that when technologies are available, how important it's important to make sure that we continue to evaluate them properly. I would like to share with you this example about minimally invasive surgery. So robotic laparoscopy, and this is, I would say, a nice example. I shouldn't say a nice example, an unfortunate example where we, as a community, because it's new, because it's robots, we think it does better. And basically the field moved to using robots for cervical cancer. And again, I'm not saying that it's bad for all the tumor, but in that case, that was a little bit debatable until somebody did a proper randomized clinical trial comparing actually minimally invasive surgery versus classical open hysterectomy for early stage cervical cancer. And actually we realized, the community realized that thanks to a proper clinical trial, actually minimally invasive robotic is detrimental to these ladies. So you see how important these new technologies, whether drug, here we are talking about more a technology than a drug, but how important it is to make sure that it's not because it's available that we necessarily optimally understand how to use that. So what we are trying to say in the evolution of clinical research in Europe today is that we have fantastic science. We understand better the biology. We have very beautiful range of new drugs. Our regulators try to adapt, of course, and make drugs specifically because the regulator deals only with drugs. So try to adapt and make these drugs rapidly available to cancer patients. But we are saying it's good, but let's make sure we have all the information to give access properly. Again, what is the right dose? Pembrolizumab was changed 3 times. So this means that some patients have had toxicity because the dose was not appropriately found. What is the schedule? The research is still ongoing. Or the patient population. So there is a pragmatic gap that is often, I would say, not taken into account in the global development. So as an organization that contributes to this evolution of the, I would say, the environment, the ecosystem, as if you remember the triangle I've shown you at the beginning, we are asking some question to the policymaker. And for me, it's very important today to speak to you, because I think it's important also to speak to patients about that, is the fact that an independent agenda in Europe to address this question is very important, but it's not structure, actually. Nobody has ever asked the EORTC to exist or to do this type of research. We are just doing it because we think it's so important, but it's becoming challenging because of many reasons that I have no time to go through. So we are making a lot of policy alert so that this can exist, of course, and be maintained in Europe. The problem that we have, and again, I don't want to go into the technical details, is that when you are in the post-marketing, so after the blue boxes on the arrow I've shown you, it's no longer a European competence, it's a national competence. So to do these trials, basically the EMA is no longer responsible. This is within the countries with those who give access. So how can we stimulate this research? How can we get support in fragmented Europe, again, in the post-licensing phase? So if an agenda of treatment optimization, identifying these questions and delivering data set is to be structured, how do we make it happen? When a drug arrives on the market, when should we address that? Obviously, as early as possible, so that not too many patients are unduly treated. So again, no delay to innovation, but making sure that we optimize this innovation. And again, how do we organize all this? We refer a little bit to, again, structuring, re-engineering the sequence of questions until we actually know how to use treatment. And again, how to prioritize that. But of course, the big question is that you have seen that most of these questions, de-escalation and so on, will not be financed by the commercial sector. So how do we make that happen at the European level? That's the question. And you will see some of the solutions we are trying to identify to do so. So we think that we are at a time when, because of the challenges we have to put that in perspective of Europe. So we have questions. The drugs come on the market. I try to make it as simple as possible. We have questions because we don't know how to use it optimally. But basically, it's going into the healthcare system and in the different member states. So how can we do optimally such a question? So we see these gaps, and we believe that there is a need to, if we want to do that, to synchronize the national priorities, to have possibly a switch to more public health-oriented clinical research rather than pure drug development. Again, how could be the role of organization like EORTC, and it's not only about the EORTC. Again, we speak a lot about drugs, but these drugs, sometimes they have to be combined with radiotherapy. So we should be ahead of the game and understanding also all the combination. So a little bit again, how do we generate the missing data sets so that we can inform better patient, doctor, and healthcare system? So that's a little bit the challenging that we are taking, if you want, in the modern, in the current evolution of the healthcare system, where we have so many drugs, which is good to have, of course, so many different technologies, but again, how to understand how to use them optimally. Well, I would like to give you an example because, of course, you represent a group of lung cancer patients or caregiver for lung cancer patients. And I wanted to give you an example of an EORTC trial that we are doing, which is really a trial, as you will see, that is purely radiotherapy. And the question is, it's for small cell lung cancer. And the question is whether prophylactic cerebral irradiation or active follow-up by imaging would be better. You see, so it's a fundamental question for these advanced patients that the doctors think could be important. So I don't want to get into too much detail, but this is indeed a question that is very important because, of course, irradiation gives some toxicity. And of course, if a trial addressing that, a positive outcome of the trial would mean less toxic exposure and an increased quality of life for this patient, and that could be changing practice. So you see typically a very pragmatic clinical trial, not necessarily addressing drug development, but with a focus on quality of life. And again, I'm not going to get into the detail of the clinical trial, but you can have the slides, of course, they can be shared with you. You will you will have the detail, and basically that's the design. Very simple clinical trial where the patients are randomized between prophylactic cranial irradiation or follow-up by MRI. I can tell you that's 4 years we are working on these trials. It's now started just to accumulate the financing to do it. So it's just to tell you that these trials are very important, we believe. They're supported by a full network across Europe of investigators that want to do this trial. But again, the means are not necessarily available. And we've been activating a huge fundraising force to be able to do this trial, because there is no solution currently in Europe to facilitate this type of trial, because they don't belong to any type of drug development process. Again, I hope it gives you a little bit more insight in the type of trial we are doing and how we contribute and how we want to address that. Coming back a little bit on the drugs, because again, when you see that we don't know how optimally to use this treatment, we said we have a problem in Europe. And the problem, as I've already alluded, is that post-marketing, it's no longer a European competence. The drugs are within the country to give access with all the variability that we know, all cancer patients not having necessarily access at the same time across the member state and so on. So it's big debates. The problem is that it's very difficult to speak to 27 countries. So we've been discussing a lot at the European level. And finally, we went back to the European Medicine Agency and we said, there is an issue here, can you help us? And the European Medicine Agency was very, I would say, very open to the discussion, and they have created the Cancer Medicine Forum, which EORTC co-chairs with them, where we are addressing these questions. So basically, let's give access to innovation as rapidly as possible, but let's have the mechanism in Europe to address how to use this optimization. And again, there is a lot of work done in the academic sector, and I will just focus on the last right-hand column, where one of the objectives of the Cancer Medicine Forum is actually to discuss how this work that is done often in the post-licensing space can contribute actually to decision making, and hopefully would facilitate access, because we would have more information how to use the innovation. So the Cancer Medicine Forum has started, it's work in progress. We are working with DMA on that. We plan to have a workshop in the second part of this year to give the last, I would say, the outcome of our work. So keep posted, because I think the outcome will also be important, of course, for cancer patients and for organizations like yours. So who is a member of this Cancer Medicine Forum? So EMA and EORTC, but we have associated others. A society like ESMO, like those who are addressing geriatric oncology, but also hematology. And we have observers from different other stakeholders. We have patients, we have HTA, we have one pediatrician also, because the problems are a little bit different in pediatrics. We have an industry, we have a representative also of payer umbrella. And what was very important for us also was to have on board HTA and payers, because this way they understand the challenges, so that when it gets to them, again, post-marketing in the countries, they could be more acquainted and alerted about optimization and what is important for giving access. I wanted also to give you a very complex slide. The idea is not to go through, but this is just the background information to tell you that for non-small cell lung cancer, immuno-oncology, we don't have necessarily the information about the duration of the treatment. And there are some trials going, notably in France, that are ongoing to address this. So you see, it's typically an initiative to optimize treatment. Again, no need to go in the detail. You can go in the detail if you want. I'm sure you will have access to all this publication if you want to dig further. And it's just to give you some insight. So when interrupting immunotherapy after long disease control. So these type of questions are very important, and again are typically questions of the academic sector. Again, not into the details, but that's what we are addressing with the Cancer Medicine Forum of DMA. And basically, we can look only at the dark blue column, first column, is what are the questions that we want to address to optimize access? Who should do it? How we are going to do it? When? Because again, you've seen there is no mechanism because we fall in the gap between supranational registration and access. What would be the regulatory and legal aspects for doing this trial? How can we rapidly inform the public with the data sets? And of course, critical question is how to fund these trials, which are public health type of clinical trials. So that's the type of question we are trying to prepare with the Cancer Medicine Forum under the European Medicine Agency, so that we can potentially help the European ecosystem to evolve and embrace this type of research. Because I believe that today we have an imbalance in Europe between non-commercial and commercial research, and that's what we are trying. We need both, but we need a good balance between the two, and that's what we would like to achieve, so that we can have innovation, but also optimize this innovation for optimal access. So just to tell you that I'm coming back to the prostate trial that I've alluded to. So this is the trial that has been approved by the Cancer Mission that is going to be funded. We call it the de-escalate trial because we are de-escalating hormonotherapy for these cancer patients. And we think that this is going to be for us a game changer, how to position these trials in the landscape. And we will have also an economic agenda, an economic research, because if we give less, it's less toxicity, it's less cost for society. So of course, the first intention is patient, but if there is a societal benefit, that's even more beneficial to the community, and that's the design. Again, very simple design, continuous versus intermittent. Simple questions, but very important, medically very important questions. So again, we've been doing that at the EU level. EORTC has been doing a lot of, I would say, work in that respect, policy work. We have started already back in 2018-19 with the working with the Parliament on the manifesto. We've been working a lot also with the different EU presidency. Here you see example of the French, when the French last year had the presidency, we had a masterclass about multidisciplinarity and how to do that. We have worked with the Portugal, with Portugal, and for EORTC was mentioned on the Porto Declaration, and that's with this that we hope that we are coming, of course, to more visibility about the importance of this type of research. And of course, we are very vigilant to, of course, contribute to what is happening in Europe, and a lot is happening. You know, we have a number of regulation. There is, for instance, this Act EU initiative where we are trying to of course, to be part of. There is the UNETA. HTA are very important, of course, for access. So we are trying also to be very present at this level. There is a very interesting initiative also at the level of the WHO, the Novel Medicine Platform. And of course, we are very, I would say, conscious of the pharmaceutical regulation, how we can help also, and how we can subscribe to all these changing environment. And again, I've mentioned to you the prostate, the de-escalate trial that was granted, but it's not the only one. Actually, we got 2 other trials that were in the same vein to optimize treatment. One trial is for advanced brain tumor, another one is for sarcoma. And here also prostate is a very frequent tumor, but brain tumors and sarcoma are rarer entities. So here also big public health needs, and we were lucky to have this program funded under the Cancer Mission program that for us is really a good sign that we receive enabling organization like EORTC to do this type of trial. And with this, I'm just a little bit over time. I would like to thank you for your attention. I hope it was not too complex. This is a little bit my challenge, not to be too complex, but I hope I can take questions. And I will leave the floor, I believe, to my colleague Iryna, that will go a little bit more in details for how EORTC works with patient and patient representative. Thank you. I'll be back for the questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lacombe, for this very comprehensive review and also for showing up the roadmap that comes ahead. So, and thank you everyone for the questions you have been already sending in the Q&A and in the chat. Before going to a Q&A, I would like now to give the floor to Iryna Shakhnenko, who's going to tell us a little bit more, as Dr. Lacombe mentioned, about the work that the EORTC does in involving patients into the activities of the organization. So Iryna, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Alfonso. Thank you, of course, for the invitation. Good afternoon, everyone. It is really my pleasure and honor to be here. As Alfonso mentioned, I'm patient relationship manager at EORTC. So it means that my main role is to make sure that EORTC involves patients and caregivers in a meaningful and systematic way. And today I would like to share with you how we do it at EORTC. So please let me know if you can hear me or if you can't hear me, if you see my slides. I hope everything works.
Everything works fine. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So in my further slides, I would like to use term patient partner, because we do not only involve patients, but also caregivers and family members of cancer patients, patient representatives, patient advocates. So we prefer to use patient partner, which is a broader term than just a patient. I would like to also briefly show you the evolution of patient involvement at EORTC. I joined EORTC almost 4 years ago. So my journey is a bit shorter, but we have been involved in patients since 2011. It's been a really long journey that I would like to share with you today. We started in 2011, and back then we had contact with a couple of patient representatives. They were part of our network, and they have been building what we have now today for all these years. But gradually, as you see, we have been enhancing our patient involvement experience, and we were expanding our network as well. I think 2014 was quite an important year where EORTC started to organize biennial training course for patient and patient advocates. We call it Patient Days. Back then we had first edition. It's really a great course we designed specifically for cancer patients to explain more about cancer biology, clinical trials, regulatory framework, all the complexities that are involved in the preparation of clinical trials, also real world data. So every 2 years we have this course, and every time we update our agenda, every time we have new topics, new speakers. So I think that year was really amazing in this regard. We also, of course, expanded our network. We started with a couple of patients. Now we have over 130 people that are involved in our studies. We also, in 2021, I think it was also a nice milestone in our patient enrollment history. We conducted a survey among all EORTC groups. By groups, I mean like brain tumor group, breast cancer group, also cross-discipline groups like quality of life. Because before we saw kind of a gap between what headquarters does in terms of patient involvement and what groups were doing. So we wanted to bring all stakeholders together. And indeed, the survey really helped us understand where groups are staying in terms of patient involvement, how we can support them, what their needs are, and how we can meet those needs in a really meaningful and systematic way. We also started to involve patients in the IDMC, Independent Data Monitoring Committee. Last year, it was also 2022, sorry, it was also quite a productive year because we launched a website for patient partners. We have the whole page where you can find a lot of information about our patient involvement activities. You can apply and join our network as well. We created a brochure for patients together with our patient partners, but also medical department. So it's a nice effort that can help other patients who are going through cancer journey use this brochure, this booklet. You can also download it on our website. I will show you afterwards a link. It's really useful document. So there have been plenty of activities happening throughout all this year, and I think this is something what we have today is really an accomplishment not only of the headquarters or our groups, but also of all our patient partners that have been with us for all these years. There are several principles that we nurture and promote at the EORTC when it comes to patient involvement. Due to time constraint, I prefer to keep it short, and I will only focus on partnership because we have seen how meaningful these long-term partnerships are. It's important to expand our network and have more people involved, but it's also important to nurture a relationship that we already have. We have seen the impact of those relationships. We have EORTC, I dare say, EORTC friends, because this patient partner, this patient, they have been involved in our activities for over 10 years and they are still active in our research activities. So I think this is really something that we can say thank you to these people for this partnership as well. And also by default and by design, I believe it is so important to involve patients as early as possible and in every activity where possible, because involving them only in the development stage where patient information sheet is ready and we can ask patient to review it, it might be a bit too late, while the study concept has been already developed, but the study idea has already been discussed. So the earlier we involve patients, the better. And when it's more consistent and when they are involved in every activity where possible, this will have a bigger impact on the whole study. So that's kind of principle we try to nurture at the EORTC. So how it looks in practice. In practice, we have EORTC headquarters on one side, we have our groups and task forces on the other side, and we have our patient partners, of course. So when it comes to EORTC headquarters and patient partners, this relationship is mainly about involving these people in our study. So it's really from the very beginning, early involvement, how we call it, review of study proposals, co-developing quality of life questionnaires, reviewing patient information sheet and protocol synopsis, being part of the IDMC. In return, we provide also trainings and support needed. So this is when it comes to collaboration between these two stakeholders. Then when it comes to EORTC headquarters and groups, then we try to help groups to find the right patient partners. We recruit and have interviews with patient partners to be sure that needs of groups are properly communicated, and we can also hear what patients expect from us. So that's why this more in-person communication is needed, and we try to coordinate it and do it for our groups. But also groups can involve patients without involvement of EORTC. Patient partners can also attend group meetings, share their perspective without necessarily our involvement. They can participate in cancer-specific webinars, like sometimes we have this brain tumor awareness month and brain cancer awareness month. So that's where patient can be part of those webinars. They can be speakers and any type of ad hoc involvement groups require. And of course, we have also our patient panel. Patient panel is an advisory board, and these people actually create a link between all these stakeholders. To explain you better, I would like to show you the scheme. So patient panel is an advisory board. These are 10 people we have at least now. They come from different countries. They have different personal experiences. Some of them are former patients. Some are still going through this journey. Some are caregivers, different age, gender, and nationality. So let's say we have, of course, other EORTC groups as well, but just to show you an example with these 3 groups, let's say brain tumor group, breast cancer group, and lung cancer group, they have patient partners on board, and they do have. And these patient partners, when they come together, they form a patient panel. So you see, in this way, patient panel members, they come together, they can collaborate with each other. So they are really in close connection with each other. They have connection with the group as well as with the headquarters. So it's really nice way, the way they create this connection. So what they actually do when it comes to groups and task forces, so when it comes to groups and task forces, patient panel members, they can guide researchers on how to involve patient partners at different trial stages, because involvement in at the very early stages, like when the study concept has been discussed, differs from patient involvement when the study results are about to be disseminated. So this is different. That's where patient panel members can provide their perspective and guide researchers. Of course, members can attend group meetings, they review study documents, and they can mentor other patients that are part of these groups or about to join the group. So they can also provide mentorship. And when it comes to headquarters, patient panel members have a huge impact on what to do in regard to patient involvement. They shape our patient involvement strategy. They have been doing it for many years. They review content and format of content of EORTC communication with lay audience, like our website. They review our templates and questionnaires. They are also part of program committee for training courses for patients, like EORTC patient days. So the program that we have and the speakers that we had, everything was discussed with our patient panel members, and they have huge impact on the way this program was developed. And they all can also speak at the webinars and other relevant events. So patient panel members play a huge role at EORTC. And yeah, this is one of my last slides. I would like to share how you can help EORTC or any other patient partner can help EORTC to be sure that our research is patient-oriented and what we do really matters for patients, and that our studies are really relevant for patients. So you can do it by joining a group that interests you the most, where you have most experience with. You can be part of patient panel. You can join IDMC, or you can be involved in study reviews without necessarily being part of a EORTC group or patient panel. So in return, we're happy to provide you with training courses. Of course, it will also give you travel opportunities. You don't have to travel if you don't feel so, but for instance, if you're part of the group and the group organized, there are meetings in different countries, different cities. So if this is something for you, you can also travel for patient involvement activities if this interests you. It will also give you access, of course, to the network, not only of other patient partners, patient advocates, but also, of course, of researchers, clinical oncologists, and innovation and available trials. And even if it's not relevant for you, I'm sure it will be relevant for your community. And it's so important to share this knowledge within your network as well. And you can find more information on our patient involvement activities on our website. You can follow a link and join our network, and there you can apply. It's more like a really short application form where you can just let us know what kind of involvement you would prefer, what kind of cancer type interests you, and then I will get back to you with more explanation. And you can also download a brochure for patients on our website, and you can use it also with your friends, family members, whom you think it might interest and matter. I think that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Iryna. And I really would like to thank also EORTC as the organization, because it's impressive the way that you have been involving increasingly the participation of patients into the work stream of the organization. So it's absolutely great, and we'll be also happy to share these materials amongst our communication channels to see how patients, caregivers, people living with the disease can engage with you and of course collaborate and work together. So we still have 10 minutes left for questions. Thank you for those who have already sent some in the chat and in the QA window. Just remember, if you would like to make your questions live by using your microphone, you can press the raise hand icon. And I'm going to start passing you the questions. So Dr. Lacombe, Iryna, and just sending the questions, please. Any of you who feels comfortable by answering them, that would be nice. So I'm going with the first one, which is about, it's saying the patient perspective and expectations may vary from the researcher's point of view, and this is something that can potentially lead to some ethical challenges. So from your perspective, how the expectation of a patient living with cancer, which is participating in a trial or in a research, should be managed and considered within the framework of a clinical trial?
Is it for me or for Denis?
For whoever feels better.
Yeah, maybe I can start and Iryna can complement. Indeed, there are sometimes different perception from the researcher point of view and from the patient point of view. There are some clinical trial design which are very complex, indeed, and I think I'm thinking notably about some trial that we are doing in rare tumors, for instance, where you know, sometimes there is no reference treatment very well accepted, and or we are not sure, for instance, about what is the optimal treatment. And sometimes there are extreme situations, and I'm thinking more specifically of a trial that we are currently discussing for very rare gynae tumors, where patients are going to be randomized between a treatment and nothing. And you know, this type of trials are very important for the doctors. The doctors would like to randomize that. In this way, the question is, what is the acceptability for the cancer patient to be randomized between a treatment and nothing? When we know that this nothing is possible, because that's what can be proposed to the patients outside the clinical trial, but we don't know. So you know, that's the difficulty, and that's where the discussion with the patient is very important. What is the acceptability for you as a patient about this type of design, or should we think differently? For instance, we are discussing a lot now to switch in this type of situation from a pure randomization to, for instance, patient preference. So what would be the patient preference? But we know also, again, I take the hat of the doctor and the methodologist, that if you go for that, you lose the power of randomization to have the real information. But I think this is the type of discussion we have to take in today's environment, because again, it's not because we think it's the best methodology or the best way to address the question that it is necessarily what the patient wants. So I think that's very important, indeed.
And we'll come back to that, because I see that you mentioned a couple of things that we're also asking in 2 questions. Before that, this probably will go to you, Iryna, because it's about the patient involvement activities in the EORTC. So we have a person here who's asking, what is the time commitment required to get involved as a patient representative in the EORTC activities, and what skills are needed?
Yeah. Yes, time commitment. That's why I think it's important for us to enhance our network, to be sure that we do not involve same people in same project, because otherwise it will be really, it will cost a lot of time and energy for these people. So really, I really consider this. And practically speaking, I can tell you that it really depends on the project and type of involvement. Let's say if you are part of the group, you will be invited to be to join the group meeting, and it will take like 1 hour. Normally there is no preparation before the meeting, so it will mean 1 hour, let's say in a month, in 3 months. Review of study document may take like 2 hours per document, so it really depends. But I can assure you that we do think about it, we do consider it, and we don't involve patients in a way that it overload them and make them escape or, you know, their own commitment, because we understand that, yeah, it's not their main activity.
Thank you so much, Iryna, for clarifying in a way, as we're going to share the information. If any one of you attending the webinar has any other questions, you can pass them to EORTC. So coming back, Dr. Lacombe, you were mentioning the power of randomization as a tool to generate hardcore and strong evidence. So there's a question here. It says, how do researchers handle experimental versus control arms when you're using different therapeutic approach? So for example, mentioning surgeon versus pharmacological approach, or radiotherapy versus immunotherapy, just to mention a few. Doesn't this may lead to a bias as blind randomization is not possible?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. It's a very good question, because sometimes, you know, you have two weapons, but you don't know which one is better. Okay, and the two are possible. And these trials where you compare two different methodologies, and you have seen in the big, the slide, if you could go back to the slide, you will see these trials comparing radiotherapy versus surgery, for instance. So two different disciplines, two different type of doctors. And these are extremely complex, very difficult, because you need to convince the doctors that what they do may not be the best. And they should have the, I would say, intellectual honesty to be challenged. And in that case, it's only randomization that can tell you, because you don't know. And that's why I've shown you also the example of surgery, open surgery versus minimally invasive robotic surgery for cervical cancer. You know, we should have the intellectual honesty not to jump to conclusion. And that's where it is extremely important. But indeed, sometimes the patient may not want to be randomized because they have a preference. And we have to take this into account. But also sometimes the doctors don't want to randomize because they believe what they do is the best. And here I think there is room for discussion indeed, so that we make sure we deliver the most robust evidence, and that when we give a treatment to a cancer patient, we control the uncertainty as much as possible. So, level 0 doesn't exist, but at least we should always aim to the highest level of certainty. And that's why I know there is a lot of debate about all these questions, but at the EORTC, we stand by the principle that if we want to be intellectually honest, and if we want to change standard of care, when possible, the default, I would say the default situation is randomization. We know that there are situations where it's not possible, and we have to discuss alternative treatment, taking into account indeed the patient perceptions. But that's very, very challenging, and I think this should nourish the continuous debate, because science evolves, treatments evolve, and there is not a definitive answer to that. I think this is a continuous debate that we must have.
Thank you. This really, you mentioned this randomization. This links with another question that we have here from a patient, from a participant, saying that it's speaking about the new adaptive designs of clinical trials. So how do you think these new adaptive designs, like using crossovers, can improve the outcome for patients? and how this challenge researchers in producing robust evidence?
Yeah, so I think, again, we have, you know, when I started my career more than 30 years ago, we had only phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and randomized and non-randomized. Today, you have plenty of type of design, crossover, Bayesian, frequentist approach. You have, you even have this trial so-called agnostic across tumors and so on. So we have plenty of possibilities. What I always say, and I had a presentation earlier this week in a conference for rare cancer, is that the design is just a tool. What is important is, what is your question? What is your question, and what is the level of certainty you want to have? And depending on what you want to reach, you have to select the most appropriate design. So that's what should guide. Speaking from design, there is not a better design than another. They all have their pros and cons. They are a tool, and there are two things. I always say, what is your question? Your question will define what is the design that you are going to select it. But most important, people should know the limits of the design they are going to use. Because with a design, you can claim this and you may not claim this. So you have to make sure what you can claim with the design you have selected. And if you follow this principle, basically, again, you try to tend as much as possible to the highest level of evidence that you want to deliver for patients and community. So voilà, I don't think there is a straight answer. All designs have their benefits and inconvenience. It's important that methodologists do understand the limits and what they can claim with.
Thank you. I'm not sure.
If I may
yeah,
briefly add to what
Iryna, of course.
Just really briefly, that is why I think patient involvement should be seen as really mutual learning, where researchers can learn from patients and patient can learn from researchers, but patients maybe shouldn't claim themselves as researchers, and researchers can never be in the shoes of patient unless they're patient. So I think that's why this dialogue should always be there, and it should be really complementing each other and seen as mutual learning.
Yeah, it makes total sense as research are becoming more and more complex, and we have a better understanding of many diseases. Of course, this need of complementation and adaptation should come in from both sides, and it's just one size doesn't fit all, of course. Dr. Lacombe and Iryna, I would like to ask you, I'm not sure if you have other commitments, but may I take you 4 or 5 minutes more of your time? I have some other questions, but if you have to leave, we can finish the session.
Yeah, I have another phone conference immediately following, so okay, maybe I can take another question.
Okay, so let's go with the last question before closing. So I will take this one. So the one on this says that the European Directive on Clinical Trials has emphasized the importance of providing lay summaries to general population, and more in particular to patients who have participated in a clinical trial. So since the implementation of the regulation from the EORTC perspective, would you consider that this has been successful? Do you find that there are still gaps or areas of improvement?
Well, I think we are still in the, I would say, in the discovery phase of the implementation of the clinical trial regulation. It's just mandatory since the 31st of January this year. I think it goes through this, how do you say that, the disease of the infancy or something like that. For EORTC, we have some challenges because the clinical trial regulation, again, may not have necessarily anticipated all the issues related with non-commercial trials. But I must admit that we have addressed our question at the EMA, and we have good support to address these challenges. So I think it's an important regulation. I hope it will indeed have some good benefit, like the lay summary. But of course, we need to adapt. We need to adapt, and it will require that everybody accepts to leave its comfort zone and find a good way to implement it properly.
Well, so thank you. So, well, sorry for those who said some questions, but it seems that we have run out of time. This is a topic
but I'm happy
yeah.
if you want to send the questions in writing. We are happy to make written answers as much as we can. That's so that you can circulate in the network, in your network.
I'll do that. I thank you that. So we'll close the session now and we'll give you back the time. But before ending, I just would like to thank you again, Dr. Lacombe and Iryna. Thank you very much on behalf of LuCE for giving us your valuable time today. Thank you all for attending the session today. I would just like to remind you that the recording of the session would be available in the upcoming days in our YouTube channel. And also I would like to encourage you to follow our upcoming educational activities on our social media. We will also circulate the information on how to engage in the EORTC activities if you want to have more information. And just a brief petition that right after this the end of this webinar, you will receive, or there will pop up a feedback form, so you just can provide us feedback about the session, about the topic that you will be interested in receiving in the upcoming weeks and months from LuCE. So being said that, again, Dr. Lacombe, thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We hope to see you soon in our upcoming activities, and I wish you all a very, very good evening and rest of the day. So thank you so much.
Thank you to you. Thank you for the invitation, and with great pleasure anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.